IELTS Listening, version 53997. You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. Write all your answers in the listening question booklet. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1 on page 2 of your question booklet. Part 1. You will hear a woman talking to a builder who is going to do some building work at her house. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Morning, thanks for coming round. I'm Sally.
Morning. So just before we get started, I'll just make a few notes. So, we're at 15 Hill Street.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, great. And then I need to write down your contact information, just for the office, you know. So, first, what's your surname, please, Sally?
It's Keyworth. I'll spell that. Keyworth.
And your phone number, I've got that somewhere. Yes, 027 584 6613.
That's right.
Okay, Sally, so what building work would you like to have done?
Well, let's go into the kitchen first. So, you see, it's quite dark in here. We've tried having a few lights fitted, but it hasn't really made any difference. So, what we've decided is the window is too small. We'd like a larger one.
That shouldn't be a problem. And is there anything else you'd like done in the kitchen?
Well, at this time of year, I shouldn't complain really, but I wish it wasn't so hot in here. Is there anything you can do about that?
Air conditioning?
It's too expensive.
How about a fan, then?
Yes, that would be perfect.
Ah, righto. And what's next, Sally?
Well, if we walk through into the bathroom, the thing is, when my father's staying, he can't use the bath. So I thought here, on the back wall, I'd like you to fit a shower. Is that possible?
Shouldn't be too hard. I'll get you some brochures, because there are a few ways of doing that.
Thanks.
Now, those tiles on the wall look new, so do you want to keep those?
Yes, the tiles are new, but actually my husband doesn't like them. We want to change to those very small ones, but do I have to choose a colour now?
You can do that later. I'll get some charts for you to look at.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
Now the last thing, let's walk outside. I need to show you some things outside the house.
Righto. Oh, nice garden. And the fence looks in good condition.
Yes, it's new, but the thing is the gate. It's too low. You have to bend down to open it. We need something that's higher.
Right, I'll see to that.
Then the other thing is the garage here. We had a break-in, actually.
Yeah, I can see. The door should be fine, but the lock. I'll replace that, shall I?
Yes, thanks. Then also, if you step back here and look up on the roof, you can see that it's damaged.
Did that happen in the storm a couple of weeks ago?
Yes, that's right.
I'll get up there and take a look at that then. That might be quite a big job, but I'll get back to you once I've had a look.
OK.
I can see that your rain gutter is broken as well.
Can you fix that?
Well, I'll need to replace it, maybe with a steel one. It'd be stronger.
No, plastic will be fine, thanks. It's cheaper.
OK.
And that's everything, I think. Is there any other information you need? What about a start date?
Well, I'm completely booked all April, and I've got a job on May the 5th. That'll be a few days, so let's say May the 8th.
OK.
Now, what about a key in case you're out?
We have a security code. I'll give you that. It's a mix of letters and numbers. The code is AG4176.
Got that. OK, we'll organise some...
That is the end of Part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 1.
Section 2. You will hear a company manager talking to staff about procedures to follow if a fire breaks out at work. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14 on page 3. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Hello, and thanks to everyone for being on time. The meeting will be fairly short and we'll only be looking at fire procedures. I had a similar meeting with the senior fire officers earlier today, but you're all here because you've volunteered to act as fire wardens for your own particular department. And for some of you, this will be your first time in the role. Although you'll probably have taken part in several fire drills since you've been here. But now the construction work is finished and we have a couple of new corridors and stairways, we need the meeting to update everyone. And before I forget, you might have noticed a bit of upgrading last week. The handheld fire extinguishers, the standard ones on the wall, the report says they're all working well, as is the overhead sprinkler system. But the old alarm system has been replaced and should be a lot more reliable. Anyway, as fire wardens, you have a number of responsibilities. OK, those wardens responsible for the factory buildings, you'll remember we had a minor fire back in January. Luckily, the fire doors around the room stopped most of the smoke from getting out, but the alarm should have been pressed a lot earlier. From what I understand, staff felt somewhat reluctant to activate it themselves and were looking for someone senior. So please ensure that everyone knows it's their responsibility to take action immediately. Can you also make sure that if anyone new has been hired since then, that they've read the fire notices? And wardens for office departments, you'll also have to have a word with your staff. When the fire alarm went off in January in that minor fire, people got out of the office building pretty quickly. That was fine, but once they were out, they stood right in front of the doors. So if the fire crews had needed to access the offices, they would have been prevented. Good to see that everyone had left their bags and stuff behind, though.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20 on page 4. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
OK, next on the agenda. There's a few aspects of fire safety that we need to go through with all you wardens. Firstly, we want to make sure that when we have the next fire drill, there's nothing blocking the way in the escape routes. No obstacles, I mean. So please have a look at that as soon as possible. We want to be able to get outside very quickly. One thing that should definitely be on your to-do list is making sure no one's locked the fire doors and that it's easy enough to get through them. Now, you might remember that last year we had a fire officer come and visit and show us what to do if we see a colleague starting to suffer from the effects of smoke inhalation. Well, the same officer's coming back to lead another session. Another issue is how to handle the fire extinguishers. Someone from the local fire department is booked in to teach people how to do that. I think it would be a good idea if fire wardens and department staff attended those sessions. Let's see, what else is on the list? Oh yes, the evacuation points. The green area behind the main car park, the pavement on Hunter Street, and the unused area behind the factory car park. Fire wardens need to make sure all staff are familiar with these locations for evacuation, so please send out emails directly after the meeting. And the last point is to do with flammable liquids. I believe there have been a few concerns about where they were being stored in the warehouse, but that's been resolved now. However, if anyone has anything else to report, do let me know.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3 on page 5.
Part 3. You will hear a student called Susan talking to an education officer called Edward, who works at a nature reserve in East Africa called Chumbi. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Hello, Susan. My name's Edward.
Hello. Thank you for agreeing to talk to me. I sent you a letter.
Yes.
I'm doing an education course, and I'm looking at how local institutions interact with their community. I was a tourist here in Chumbe a few years ago, and when I read about your science program for schools, I thought I could use it as a case study.
Fine. Go ahead and tell us what you want to know.
Well, I know that since I first came here, you've expanded your activities.
Yes, we have. Chumbey's always been important because it's a coral island and it's got a wide variety of wildlife species. But a few years ago, it became even richer in natural resources.
Is that because there were increased safeguards?
Yes, we were officially designated a nature reserve, and now we've got more people coming from all over the world to study here in our ongoing research program.
Can you tell me about the background to the school's program?
Uh-huh.
I know it started in 2004, and I think it was intended to link directly into the school's ecology syllabus.
That's right. We responded to an approach by a local primary school teacher. He asked if he could bring his pupils here to do some nature studies with our rangers. Then we started organising field trips for other schools. We got government funding, initially for 12 months. That period was eventually extended, but the government sent a team to do a formal evaluation first.
Do you mind just telling me briefly what their report said?
They found that, in general, the field trips had been enjoyable and stimulating, and they'd been effective in raising awareness, both in the children and also in their teachers, of the natural environment and the need to manage resources carefully.
Great. And did they suggest any changes?
Not exactly. They told us what the problems were, and then they left it up to us to decide how to solve them.
For example?
The feedback suggested that the field trips could be even more beneficial if schools had materials to give them a better grounding in life sciences.
I see.
So, our staff here in Chumbey started producing materials for schools. We're already distributing an information pack that we produced for use in class prior to the field trips, and that material seems to be working well. And we've also begun work on another pack about coral reefs, specifically for teachers, which we'll be trialling in September.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
The feedback also told us that schools weren't certain what to expect when they came on the trips. So, we decided to institute a preparatory visit by our staff to give a presentation.
What does that involve?
About a month beforehand, members of our education team meet teachers and pupils and talk them through a sample itinerary for their field trip. They also explain how they have to behave, because we have to be very careful about health and safety.
And I suppose you also have to make sure that the resources themselves don't suffer any damage?
Exactly. Another thing the team does is explain the correct handling of snorkeling apparatus, and children are allowed to try it out.
Oh.
We take it all along to the meeting.
And now that you've introduced these changes, will there be another evaluation?
Eventually, yes. But we've already had some very positive feedback informally. Teachers have told us they feel better prepared for the trip and have a better idea what to expect, and that the pupils feel less nervous about the trips. And there have been a couple of unanticipated benefits too. Staff here say that the preparatory visits help them to gauge the level of the pupils in terms of their understanding of conservation issues.
So you can tailor your program more effectively to the needs of each group?
Yes, and also because our rangers have a chance to explain about the tides and the fact that the coral reef can only be visited on foot at specific times, schools have been getting here much more punctually.
Great. Well, thank you for filling me in. That was very useful.
Is there anything else we can help you with?
Could I possibly see the formal evaluation report you mentioned?
Yes, I can arrange to get you a copy. Do you want the materials pack too?
Oh, that'd be great. Then I can take them back with me. I won't read them here. I've only got a couple of days. And I'd like to ask a few of the teachers who've been here some questions, if possible.
We'll give you some contact details. But if you've got time, wouldn't you like to participate in one of the field trips? We've got a new group arriving here this afternoon.
I'd really appreciate that. I was going to ask if I could just take some photos of them, but this would be even better. And my camera's not working right anyway.
Good. Well, why don't you come and have lunch with us?
That is the end of part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 3.
In the last lecture, we looked at managing a project to completion. Today, we're going to be looking at a way of judging just how successful your project has been. It's called the after-action review process. A typical project review is completed long after the project is finished, and so it's too late to change the outcome. Wouldn't it be better to evaluate it along the way so you can learn from your mistakes at each stage and improve on them? It was for this reason that the Army devised the after-action review process as a way for everyone to learn quickly from experiences in the field. Okay, so what are the benefits of using an after-action review? Firstly, it's not just limited to very large or very formal projects, but is useful for all sorts of things. For example, you may want to use it to debrief following a staff meeting or any other regular operational function. In the same manner, it's an extremely effective tool to use following a safety incident and can reveal important lessons so that accidents can be avoided in the future. So you can see that this would definitely be a positive step for any business. An added benefit of the review is that because the focus is on learning, It really improves communication within working groups. So let's have a look at what an after-action review is. It's a structured session or meeting that does the following. It focuses on the resulting outcomes and the reasons for these. It encourages active participation among the team and, very importantly, emphasises how vital it is for the team to trust one another. Here are some of the key elements to remember for when you're conducting an after-action review. Where possible, it's really good to have an external person to facilitate the process. This helps to direct the discussion and can also prevent a stronger member of the review from dominating the others. Make sure that you encourage active involvement. Often, shy members won't say anything, so one way to encourage them to get involved is to ask people to put their comments in writing. If they aren't given the opportunity to do this, they may be intimidated by other members of the group. Another key element is to be aware of the type of questions you ask. In order to make sure that participants don't search for what they think is the perfect answer, always ask open questions. For example, what would you do differently next time? Ensure that every member of the team has the chance to speak. It's also important to make sure you write down the specific recommendations made by everyone. But don't forget to pass this information on to non-participating team leaders so that they too can learn from the experience. This is how after-action reviews contribute to organisation-wide learning and improvement. However, if no one follows up on these recommendations, then the process is wasted. You should also ensure that the ideas from the after-action review are incorporated into your business by organising staff training around them. Finally, the last thing you want is to find that you don't get through everything because you've been talking too much, so make sure you keep a constant eye on the time. An after-action review is not something that you should ever plan on conducting in 2 sessions. Now, before we go on to look at the next type of project review,